Hello, mathematicians! It's Mrs. Coleman here, and today for math, we're going to learn how to tell time on a clock. Before we do, let's warm up our brains. Telling time really means to mark and organize parts of your life. We actually already started learning how to tell time in some different ways this kindergarten year. Let me remind you. One of the ways we learned how to tell time is by using years to mark and organize our lives. We used words like past, present, and future, and we numbered the years so that we can show when things happened. So for example, this is a picture of me from the past. In the middle, you'll see a picture from the present, and here is a picture of what I might look like in the future. We also learned how to tell time by using months to organize our lives. There are 12 months in a year, and every month has about 30 or 31 days inside of it. Let's remind ourselves of these months by naming them. Ready? Here we go. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. We also learned that we can mark time by looking at weeks. Here is the month of May, the month that we're actually in. And you can see that this calendar shows that there are 5 rows in this month. So every row is a week. The first row is the first week of May. The second row is the second week of May. And then the third week of May, fourth week of May, and the fifth week of May. And inside each week of every month, we can mark time by dividing the week into days. There are 7 days in a week. Name them with me. Here we go. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Now that we remembered the different ways that we can mark time that we've learned this kindergarten school year, years, months, weeks, and days, now we can learn how to tell time on a clock. Learning to tell time is probably one of the most important math skills that you can learn. It's really important because it helps structure your day and organize your life and the lives of other people. Here are some examples where you might need to know how to tell time. When it comes to school, you need to know what time it's going to start so you can be there on time and what time it's going to end so that you can stop the learning. If you have a birthday party, you need to tell people what time to be there so they can show up. And then you need to also tell people when it will end so that they'll go home. If you set up a play date with somebody, well, you probably want to structure it around a time so that you know what time you're going to meet up and hang out together. It's really important to tell time. We're going to start by learning about the parts of a clock. Here is the clock, and we call this part the face of the clock. And on this face, there are 12 numbers. It starts with 1 and goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and it stops at 12. When you look at the clock, there are 3 sticks on the clock. We call these hands. This first hand is called the hour hand. It tells us which hour it is. This second hand is called the minute hand. It tells us how many minutes have gone past that hour. And the third hand is called the second hand. It clicks by every second. So here is the clock, and we call this type of clock an analog clock. And here are some different analog clocks you might see in this world. Now that we know the parts of a clock, I am going to use this clock to show you how the clock works and what a typical day might feel like. So we're going to think back to when we were in school, and I'm going to use a school day as our example. I want you to keep in mind as I describe the day that every house and family is different in the way that they schedule their day. And every classroom typically learns the same things, but we might do them at different times. So I'm just going to describe a typical day in a classroom. Are you ready? Let's do it. This clock says 7 o'clock. And in the morning at 7 o'clock, you might just be waking up. So you're waking up, you're eating breakfast, you're brushing your teeth, you are getting dressed. And by 8 o'clock, you should probably start heading to school, either in a car or a bus. So you're heading to school, you make it into school, maybe you have breakfast at school, you get your stuff settled in, we have Brookview Live, and then by 9 o'clock, everyone should be in morning meeting. So you do morning meeting, you play games, you have fun, you talk about the day, and then by 10 o'clock, you're doing some literacy activities. So like reading workshop, writing workshop, read alouds, Letterland. And then by 11 o'clock, we need to start heading outside for recess. So you're playing with all your friends, and then you head to lunch. And then once you get back and get settled, you have some quiet time. And then at 12 o'clock, we usually go to specialist class. So you might be in music, gym, art, or media. And then once we get back to the classroom, it might be 1 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock, we might be doing some math together, or science, or social studies, health, or maybe even an art project. And by 2 o'clock, it's usually time to start snack and playtime. So you're playing for this long in the classroom, and then it's time to clean up, and usually at 3 o'clock, we have closing circle. And then we leave, and you either get in a car or go to adventure club, or get on the bus, and you head home. And then some of you at 4 o'clock might have an afternoon snack and kind of just chill and get settled at home. And then at 5 o'clock, maybe some of you start to go play with your toys, or you watch TV, kind of relax. And then at 6 o'clock, it's usually time to eat dinner. So you're eating dinner, hanging out at home. And I'm guessing by 7 o'clock, you're usually getting ready for bed. So maybe you're taking a bath or a shower, brushing your teeth, getting into your pajamas, reading a bedtime story. And then by 8 o'clock, hopefully you are asleep. And you're usually asleep for 9 o'clock at night, and 10 o'clock at night, and 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. We also call this midnight. And 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then usually by 7 o'clock in the morning, you're up again, and you do it again and again every day. Now that we went over the parts of a clock, how the clock works, and how a typical day goes, it's time to practice how to tell time. For this activity, you're going to need something to write with. I grabbed a whiteboard marker, and an eraser. You need to grab something to write with too. Here are some options. You could also go grab a whiteboard and a dry erase marker, or you can grab paper and a writing tool like a pencil, marker, or crayon. You could use shaving cream. You could use rice in a pan, or you can simply use your finger and trace in the air. When I say pause, I want you to push the pause button on this video and go get the writing materials that you would like to use for this lesson. Pause. Welcome back. How this is going to work is on the screen you are going to see an analog clock, and it's going to show us a time. Together, we're going to work to find out what time it is, and the way we're going to write it down with our writing materials is in digital form. So you'll see what that will look like in just a moment. You got your materials? Let's do this! So if we look at that analog clock, let's look at the short hour hand first to tell us what hour it is. I'm looking and I see that short hand is pointing right at the 3. That's the hour it is. So write a 3. After that, you need to make sure that you do 2 dots on top of each other. This symbol separates the hours from the minutes. So go ahead and do those 2 dots. Now let's take a look at the long hand. I can see it's pointing right up at the 12. That means no minutes have gone past. So to show 0 minutes, you do 2 zeros. So the analog clock shows 3 o'clock, and this digital time shows 3 o'clock. Everybody point and read 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Let's do this again. Let's look at the analog clock and look at the short hour hand to see what it's pointing to. It looks like it's pointing right at the 7, so everybody write a 7. So that's the hour. Now to separate the hour from the minutes, we have to do the 2 dots. All right, now let's look at the long minute hand to see how many minutes have gone past 7. It's pointing right up at the 12. That means no minutes have gone by. So it's a 0, so do 2 zeros. We write 2 zeros when it's pointing right up at the 12. So let's read that analog clock. 7 o'clock. Let's read our digital time. Ready? 7 o'clock. Let's do it again. Remember, let's look at the short hour hand first. It's pointing at the 6. Now let's look at the long minute hand. It's looking right up at the 12. Let's read the analog clock together. 6 o'clock. Now let's read our digital time. 6 o'clock. Let's do it again. Let's take a look at the shorthand first. It's pointing right up at the 12, so let's write 12. The 2 dots. Now let's look at the long minute hand. That's also pointing up at the 12, so remember we write 2 zeros. Let's read the analog clock and then the digital clock. Ready? 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Let's do it one more time. Let's write the digital time down together, but this time I won't say anything. Are you ready to read both? Here we go. 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Now it's time to test yourself to see what you know. To test yourself and see what you know about telling time, I'm going to show you an analog clock on the screen. Your job is to read that clock and use your writing tools that you brought to write down the digital time that matches the analog clock. I will give you 10 seconds to do this before I reveal the answer to you. Remember, look at the short hour hand first, write that down. Then put 2 dots, then look at the long minute hand, write that down, and that will be your answer. Are you ready to try this out? Let's do it! The answer is 9 o'clock. The answer is 11 o'clock. The answer is 2 o'clock. Good work. Now it's time to review. Let's go over what we learned about with telling time. There are two different types of clocks. The first type of clock on the left side is called an analog clock. This type of clock shows a face with 12 numbers, 1 through 12, going around in a circle, and will have an hour hand, minute hand, and sometimes a second hand. The second type of clock is called a digital clock. That's shown on the right side. And that is a clock that only shows numbers telling the time. And on an analog clock, the part that tells what hour it is the shorthand. And on the digital clock, the part that tells the hour is the first number you see. And the minute hand on the analog clock is the long hand. And the part that shows the minutes on the digital clock are the numbers that come after the two dots. If you're interested in growing knowledge around telling time, you could use the help of your family members. Anytime the clock shows 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, they can ask you, "Hey, what time does this clock show?" And you can tell them. You can also practice learning how to read a digital clock. Another way you can practice learning about the clock is to draw a clock. Here's my drawing of a clock. We are going to continue learning about clocks during our distance learning. You probably noticed that today we worked with the analog clock where the hour hand was always pointing directly at a number and the minute hand was always landing on the 12. And next time we work with clocks, we're going to figure out how to tell time when the hour hand might be in between two numbers and the minute hand is not on the 12. Mathematicians, thank you so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.